I'm Andre J, and welcome to another edition of Digital Video Synthesis Environments. Today we are back on vsynth, and what I'd like to focus on in this episode is doing a lot, trying to do the most with a small amount of modulators. So if y'all remember from last time, what I did was kind of had an absurd number of modulators going on. And this time, this is kind of what I'm doing right now is just something I've been playing around with earlier in preparation. We have 3 modulators in total. I kind of want to try to do this with only 2, actually, and we won't be doing exactly this, but we'll be getting some pretty similar effects happening. But yeah, but before I dive too deep into this, I kind of want to just explore this specific thing, which I accidentally sort of came across while I was playing around with this. So you can see down here, I'm playing with the Luma key. Right at the end of the chain here, we have a Luma key going out, and we're doing some Luma key into a displaced feedback. And you can notice that when I pull the input completely out, there's this fun little moment where it kind of cycles like that. And we'll see if I can build back up to something similar like this. But I think probably the next episode, the next time I do vsynth, I'll try to focus more on like trying to do this in an automated method. Because this is a really neat effect. I've done this a lot with video waves and with wave pool too, but the vsynth internal feedback kind of offers a different sort of feel to everything. With the modulator, what I'm doing is the feedback, the internal video feedback that's happening inside of the Luma key here is being spatially displaced by this displacement 2 over here. And I've got this waveform doing rotational displacement and this waveform doing Z displacement. And actually, let me show you exactly what the displacement is happening. So I'll remove both of these. Or no, I'll just reset these so that the displacement depth is to 0. And then, so here's what would happen. I guess it's still zooming. Why is it still zooming? Because that's still set to something. There we go. So if I didn't have anything happening, we'd be doing this. Just this standard issue kind of digital video feedback thing where it just freezes. And then let me go back in here and go to the displacement depth and let me rotate it just a little bit. So you can see that this waveform, which is going very slowly, is just doing like an on and off displacement kind of thing. And then if I turn up the frequency on this, then it's going to be doing sort of more, let's see, can't really see it too much here. Yeah, basically this is just kind of freezing right now. If I change this, basically it's just locked into, there we go. If I pull some of this back in, I don't know, now it's not doing anything. Oh, because I turned the time down to 0. There. Now we can see a little bit more of that, what I was trying to talk about. Freezing up again. Yeah, this is definitely something I should try to explore more. But yeah, the thing about the totally digital feedback zones is you kind of got to be careful because it's really easy to freeze up. See, I do this, and it just sort of like reaches a stasis point. Then if I also go over to the zoom thing and turn that one in, ooh, that's pretty neat. It's kind of got to be like a little sweet spot. Yeah, that's pretty great. But yeah, I think I'll try to get back to this by the end of the episode, but if not, I'm definitely going to spend probably the next episode when I come back to vsynth, which will be 3 weeks from now, working on that. And also, I forgot to mention last time, it's always very helpful if y'all can donate for these kind of things. You go to my website, andrejcreativecoding.com, and look at the bottom of the page. There is a PayPal button where you can send me money. Donations are not required for this thing because obviously I'm just doing this free on Twitch, and you're most likely watching this on YouTube because most people don't hang out at the live one as far as I can tell. But yeah, donations are always super helpful for for giving me the time and the availability to do this sort of stuff. Yeah. Okay, so let's Control E, and let's just get rid of all of this stuff, except for like a handful of things. I'll keep the Luma key out, actually. Let's get rid of these. Let's get rid of this. Probably going to need this colorizer. Probably going to want these around, but just ignore them for the moment. And I don't want that. Don't want that. And yeah, this thing will probably come in handy, but no, let's just... Okay. And let me grab the corner pins over here. And here we go. Okay, so starting off, hello! Starting off with this waveform generator. So I've got it on pulse. I have time at like 0.2. I've got frequency at like 164 hertz. I've got the PM all the way up, but PM isn't exactly doing anything right now. And then I'm going to run the output through this displacement number 2. So displacement number 2 is going out into the corner pins right now, which is going out on the screen. You can see that this displacement isn't doing anything on its own. It's set to modulate with a couple of things. But let's ignore the modulation for now. And we can see that this displacement, let's bring this back to V. If I just do this kind of a thing, it's just going to rotate things and move things over this way, that way. We can zoom in and out. That's pretty cool. For some reason, it's not doing... Oh, because I have zoom set to mirror. If I set zoom to clear, there's different things you can do with the zoom. So you can see if I zoom out like this, we're just going to see a couple of lines going like that. If I go to clamp, it'll do that standard shader thing. If I do wrap, it'll wrap it around. And then if I do mirror, it'll mirror the things, which is why we're getting this sort of different kind of texture over here. Yeah, so what I want to do is we've got this displacement coming out, and let's send this displacement back in. I guess we already have a displacement up there set to go back in, but we'll be doing multiple displacements back into this. So we'll just leave this one right in here. Let me grab the output, and let's do some frequency modulation. And what you can do when you have chords like this, you right-click on it, hit align, and you can move them over like that so you don't have the modular chords all over the dang place. And then let me turn up FM. Alright, so now we're getting some interesting things. Maybe if I increase the pulse width, we'll start to see a little bit more. Whoa. So you see it's rotating slightly. If I set everything back to default, you just double click on things and it turns them back to default. And you see what we got here. See a little bit more clear if we just do a sine wave. So it's just feeding back on itself. It's just like maybe a tiny bit delayed, it looks like. If we move the X's and Y's around, then we'll start to get some less noisy things happening. Just the Y isn't really making a huge difference here. I might need to zoom out slightly. Oh yeah, and you can turn these to really small numbers too. You can change the ranges of these down here. Ah, so now we're getting some pretty nifty things. And as always, when I'm doing this kind of feedback stuff, I would like to have my favorite LPF4X and HPF4X plug in between everything. So we'll put these right here because this is going to be going into FM. There we go. Hey, come on. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's do high pass filter first, then low pass filter. Going there. And then as we start to pull these down a bit, increase the delay here. So now, this is a little bit different from the usual style of feedback thing because we're displacing it geometrically before we go out. So in some ways, it's like, but not like, using a different modulator to modulate itself. And if we change these angles, then we'll start to get some crazier things. We can change it so it's just aligned like that. Bring that back up to 1. All squiggly up there. Turn these filters all the way down. We get this really fun little crawling thing going on. And then let's see what this looks like if we do phase modulation instead. Try some different ones going on here. Am I doing these in the wrong direction? Try them the other way. Wow. I keep goofing things up, but it's just making it look cooler even. So that's the phase modulation going in. Whoa. That was an accident. That's pretty cool too. This is always fun when the thing that you tried doing, that you prepared, doesn't quite work out exactly the way you think, but it's all good. See if we try a couple of different ones. The pulse wave is what I'm going to end up on. Just kind of wanted to show you all these different ones. Let's go on over to this pulse wave. This is the one I want to be using because I want to also play around with pulse width modulation on this one as well. So let's turn this all back to default for a moment, and we'll just displace these slightly. That's pretty fun. You can see as you play with the pulse width, it changes around that sort of like goopy dripping pattern on the things. You change these values, you get various different kinds of noise happening. It's kind of looking better without the high pass filter for whatever reason. Let's pull this out. What was it? Mysteries. Well, we'll just stick with this one. This is what I've got. And then let's just zoom this out a tiny bit. The next thing I'm going to do is try pulse width modulation. So we've got the output of this coming in at displacement number 2. I'm going to plug this over into this one on the side, which is pulse width modulation in. And we're going to use this displaced one as a pulse width modulator. So I turn this down, we're going to start to get this kind of weird stuff going on. And you can see up here that displacement 2 already has a bunch of things set on it. So X is displaced way over. Y is displaced way over. Oh, that's what happens if we displace the angle and use that to change the pulse width. And you notice that different places you start off with the pulse width are going to change as well. And there's noise. I've never really played with the noise too much on this one, but it is an option. So let's dial the pulse width down a lot. Let's change the angle a little bit too. Alright, so we have two different displacements coming in right now. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use this displacement number 2. Each of these displacements have two different settings. The basic one here where it says initial point is just a fixed displacement. And then if you click on that, then you go and you choose displacement depth, and you can see there's all of these inputs up here which allow you to modulate displacement with another texture. So I'm going to use this displacement number 2 to modulate displacement number 1's zoom. And I'm going to use the output of this one to modulate rotation on this one. Alright, and now we're going to start getting some wackier things happening. So, pulse width modulation, I think we're going to have to modulate the X and the Y on here as well to get more interesting things happening. But I kind of want this to be pretty minimal to start with because of what I'm going to do later when I bring in the Luma key. So let's just ignore this for a moment. So I bring in the Luma key here and pull this out of the way. What I'm going to do is grab one more displacement, Control D, grab the output of this, and just so we can see it, because I haven't added any color in here, and I'm not going to for a moment, so we can see a little bit more what's going to happen with this displacement thing. I'm going to go up into color, and I think, what do we got? We've got an invert somewhere, right? Well, I can grab this edges. Edges is always fun to play with. Grab, whoop, you can stay over there. Grab this edges. And we'll take the output from this, hit align, run it through the edges, and then we'll key that in. And then let me just zoom out a tiny bit. So this is kind of what we're going to do with this displacement here on the feedback, is we're going to set up sort of a minimal chaotic thing happening up here, and then we're going to use that as seeds for this displacement, and we're also going to modulate the displaced feedback back here as well. And definitely let me know if you have any questions if you're watching this live, or just say hi if you're out there and you're watching this live too. Alright, so we've got this going on. Don't have quite what I thought was going to happen with these things. Oh, well there we go. That's starting to get a bit more complex. I think we might need one more set of these HPF, LPF things going on here. Select those, duplicate, and then with the output of this displacement that's going into the PWM, the pulse width modulation. Hello! We'll run that filter thing on here too, and then we're going to start to get a bit more of that. So the filtering on the feedback, the signal feedback chains, is really the key to that sort of like the more complex pattern things happening. We maybe see them a bit more if I switch over to, yeah, surprisingly not. Not over here, not over here. A little bit stronger over there. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I changed up. This isn't exactly what was happening when I prepared for the things, but you know, I kind of set myself up for this because I like prepare this giant patch, and then I take really vague notes, and then I throw the entire patch away and say, let's start from scratch. But that's sort of like my approach in general, and it's sort of an approach I would like to encourage other people to have. It's the idea of coming at things from first principles instead of saying that you have like, instead of just like saving up a bunch of presets and like memorizing like the large scale things. I think it's more useful to sort of understand the basic principles of how something works, and then you can recreate it anytime, but with slight variations. Like didn't exactly have this. You saw the Instagram posts that I was made earlier. It was kind of different, but also kind of similar. But yeah, it also encourages experimentation, and reminds me, like it's reminding me right now, that things that I thought I knew, I didn't know. But it's helping me explore different things and how I'm doing things. Yeah, this is pretty great. Yeah, if you notice what was happening earlier, let's try that again with this one. Ha, that's pretty rad. Pulse width down to minimum. Alright, so I am going to add one more modulator into the mix here. So I said minimal modulators, so that's 2 modulators, but I think 2 modulators, and we're going to have a fuck ton of displacements going on. That'll be a pretty crazy amount of things to work with. So let me just grab literally just one more of these waveform generators. Bring that over here, and let's have this one be a triangle. And I'm going to grab a VCA. So over in the processors, I'm going to grab a VCA. That means voltage controlled amplifier. What this is going to do, so I would like to take the output of this pulse width, what I'm using to modulate that. Oh, we lost you. And run it into here, and you notice if I turn the bias up, then we get the squiggles back happening again, where we have sort of skinnier squiggles than we did before. Because we can also modulate how strong this is going to be. So I'm going to use this waveform generator as the AM. Oh, hello! So AM means amplitude modulation, and in video synthesis, amplitude means brightness, because right now we're basically just working with this black and white video oscillators. So when I do the amplitude modulation on a VCA here, what it's going to do is it's going to modulate the signal that comes in through here with this signal. So if I turn the frequency way up on this one, you can see that it's modulating it like all squiggly like with a higher frequency. And if I turn it down, you can see it's just kind of going like in and out. Turn the speed up a little bit. If I make this a square wave, you can see that the modulation is going to be more discrete. Bring this back to a sine wave, and then we get this more. The Rorschach thing is happening because of the displacement mirror over here. Maybe I should do another one of these over here. I don't think we're zoomed out yet, but we will in a moment. And then start to play around with these things. And now we're starting to get some pretty nifty stuff going on here. And I'm almost on schedule to start playing around with the color. Let me know if you all have any questions on this whole kind of setup right here. But yeah, I'm going to hold myself to 2 modulators here. So we're only doing 2 modulators, but we're doing some pretty crazy stuff. This is called vsynth. Vsynth is a package from Max MSP. So you can download, Max MSP is a proprietary in like a node-based coding environment. But you can download and use it. I'm using it without an authorization right here. You can see auth expired right here. So you can use it without paying for as long as you want. You just don't get to save any patches. There isn't quite anything like this for pure data that I am aware of. Although, depending on how pure data interacts with OpenGL, you could definitely build something like this. But yeah, pure data as a video processing thing is a little bit wonky. I think Gem is the pure data video library, if you're interested in looking into it. But that's about all I know about that zone. But yeah, Max MSP, and then you go into Packages, File, Show Package Manager, and then you search for vsynth and you pop this up and you can play along with this. Okay, so we got this waveform generator over here, and I said I was going to start doing some color. So let's do that. So in between here, before I bring it into the Luma key, I want to have some color going on. Pull this over here into the colorizer. So if I want to find colorizer and hue modulator, these are all going to be up here in color. I want to find this temporal filter, which I don't know if I need that right now. let's ignore the temporal filter for now. But if you want to find one, that's going to be over in processors, temporal filter. Yeah, so let's grab this and that down here. So now I have two hue modulators, which seems kind of silly. So I've got this colorizer right up here, and you can see that because I'm just feeding it a black and white signal, it's only doing like a matte colorizing thing on it. I think that would do that anyway, right? Can't remember. Does it do? Yeah, it's just matte. Colorizer is just matte. It's not scale-based. It's just one color overlaid on everything. Then I've got these hue modulators here. So what I want to do with this hue modulator right here is I want to take the exact same signal that I'm feeding. Let's align this one. I want to give it a little edge. Do I use vsynth in my hardware? My hardware is stuff that I design myself, which is like built to run on Raspberry Pis. I don't think that Max MSP can run on a Raspberry Pi, but Pure Data definitely can. I use these principles when I design my hardware, though. It's all coming from the same kind of place. Let me get one more displacement here. So, I'm sort of, in a way, the displacements are what I'm using to so right now I'm doing a class on vsynth. If you want to find out more about the things that I make for the Pis, I kind of don't want to turn this into a commercial for my stuff. So you can hop on over to Andre J Creative Coding and check out the stuff over there. Video synthesis environment Raspberry Pi. So I'm using these displacements as sort of different kind of like essentially they're being modulation sources. They're fed from something else. No worries at all. I just don't want to go too far into selling things or whatever. It's sort of like my business thing, and this is like a fun break from doing business stuff. I'm going to take this output here, feed it into the displacement, try to clear stuff up. And I'm going to use this to modulate the hue, but I'm going to zoom. So I'm going to zoom just the tiniest amount, so I'm going to use Shift-click to do a very tiny zoom. And you can see what I'm doing is kind of just I just want there to be a little bit of an edge happening. I'll do the same thing with the X and the Y as well. I just want there to be a tiny edge. Maybe I don't zoom at all, and I just do the XY. There we go. So we have this sort of a nice little outline thing going on here. I've got this other hue modulator. Can't remember exactly what I was doing with this other hue modulator and the other one, but I'll grab the output from this over here, stick it in here and see what happens. Oh, that's pretty nifty. And just gently modulate it. So I think I mentioned this last time, but when I'm adding color onto things, I really like to modulate the hue with various versions of the same signal that's coming in, because you can see it's sort of it gives things more of a texture. So if you just do the colorizer thing, you're going to have something matte. Even you can have light gradients, which is pretty nice, but without these hue modulators being fed from other sources, you wouldn't really have color gradients. And I feel that both light gradients and color gradients are really important in perception in terms of giving things space. Even if it's a very stepped gradient, like this kind of a thing, it adds a level of making the thing sort of jump out at you, especially with the sort of complementary colors going on and the sort of complementary saturation. And you also notice, if you have this set up and you're playing along, if you play around with this thing right up here, you can get some really neat sort of different effects happening. So we go up here and we can have super desaturated things. But yeah, so pretty much exactly where I got where I wanted to be at 8:30, and we're going to start to play around with the feedback. Alright, let me remove this edges right now. This is going a little bit too crazy for where I want to be at the moment. So we've got this going on right here. If I turn down PWM, then we're going to have this really nice sort of like topographical crawl. This is, I don't know, I'm just a sucker for all kinds of video feedback, but especially this kind of just like really static, like where it just like, it's like watching these sort of like the moire patterns of the edges of these lines is a lot of fun for me. Yeah. Happens when we change the hue modulation amount on this one. Super fun. Alright, so I'm going to use with this one. So we don't have any feedback going on into this waveform generator. That seems kind of ridiculous, right? Grab 2 more of these. These blocks I find to be absolutely like the most useful things possible when I'm doing this kind of a thing. I'm going to grab another displacement thing. And I'm going to set a feedback. Let me try these before the displacement and see what happens there. We'll go in, let's try these the other way. Did not mean to put that there. This one, go in here, and we'll do phase modulation in. This is my rule of thumb, is just modulate everything. If you have anything which has a modulation input, put something in there. You won't regret it. All it's going to do is make things even more niftier. But the other reason I did this is because I wanted to use this waveform to drive the feedback displacement. So the way you know what the different inputs are, so first off, the way you know what the different inputs are is you've got these little little white tabs at the top of things, and if you hover the mouse over that, like on here it says B patcher, VS displacement, MAC patch, blah 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 blah, X modulation in. So the X modulation in tells you that this is going to modulate X. Likewise for Y, Z, or angle, and Z. And then with these, the waveform generators, they have frequency modulation in, that's FM in, right here. They have PM in, which is phase modulation in right here. And then there's PWM in, which only makes a difference if you're on pulse. And then the reason I'm doing high-pass filter first before the LPF is I forgot which one I like to do first. And I was doing them the other way, and I tried it a couple ways, and it seemed like I wasn't exactly getting the effect I wanted. So just kind of mixing things up. At this point, I have such a complicated signal path going on that, to a certain extent, it might not matter, but I just kind of wanted to double check and see what happened with this one. And now we'll find out. So I've got this PMing. What else was I looking for? Let's grab a video monitor out here. Oh no, that's a waveform monitor. I want to use a preview. Yes. So let's preview this one to see what's going on. So, it's like not a lot is going on over here. I wonder why. This is going to the high-pass filter. Going into there. Interesting. I should be seeing some crazy noisy things happening, but I'm not. I wonder what I'm doing wrong. So, I remove this. This definitely can. It's not super happy that I'm also running OBS right now and I'm also capturing it. So, and I've also got the OBS preview thing happening. So it can be pretty heavy. Usually, it's kind of, you can resize the thing and use different resolutions and use something else to upscale it, basically. But basically, it runs about as heavy as you want it to, more or less. The filters are actually really computationally, they're pretty computationally heavy because they're running convolutions. If I just had these things around, I can say, heck with these filters. Because the less filters you have, the faster everything will run. Let's do a wrap over here. There we go. So that's getting some crazier things happening on this one. So the reason I wanted this particular one to be a little bit crazier is that I was going to use this to modulate the feedback. I think I showed you before, so I've got this initial point, if I zoom, then we get that pretty awesome thing, I zoom out, we get that pretty awesome thing. But I don't want that to be static, I want that to be dynamic. So, grab this one over here, put this into zoom, and then not initial point. I'm going to click on initial point and go into displacement depth. And then just a tiny bit there. So that's just a displacement depth of 3, but you can see it's displacing it with this really complicated pattern. So that is, and then let's see what happens if I turn this threshold off so we're not keying anything in. Trying to turn it down to the tiniest amounts. Then we just have this tiny, tiny bit of light coming in here. And, okay, so this is pretty much where I wanted to get. Now, I guess what I said I would like to do as well. Whoa. So I wanted to try to automate this kind of I/O here. So can't really automate the threshold here because LumaKey doesn't have controls in, but I wonder if I could just automate the luminance of the signal coming through here, and if I set that to another little oscillation thing to turn that on and off just globally, then maybe I can do like an automated version of this thing where we just like feed it a little bit and then just like watch it do that. Oh yeah, and then I kind of want this displacement to be bipolar. By bipolar, I mean that the displacement, does it? Where? It's got texture in. It's got texture in, control in. So if I give it a control in here, then I can control. I thought this was the input. So can I plug 2 things into here? I mean, I'll give it a shot. Yeah, I don't exactly know that much about Max MSP to begin with. I just sort of know about signals in general. The LFO object? Yeah, I have no idea what an LFO object is, or a prepend object. I'm definitely not the person to talk to about Max MSP in general. I usually don't use these kind of things because they hurt my arm because there's too much clicking happening. What was I saying? So, I go back to initial point. No worries. I'm going to look into all these things. It's definitely good to know that that these things exist, but I'm probably not going to figure it out on the fly. But I will figure something else out on the fly, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and by all means, interrupt me if you have things to say. I'm going to do, so I want the displacement here to be bipolar, meaning I want it to go positive and then I want it to go negative. Which means, by default, this is just going to be all of the video signals here from like black to white are essentially 0 to 1. You You can think of it being normalized that way, as opposed to like an audio signal where your signal goes from -1 to 1. An audio signal is a bipolar signal, usually, potentially, whereas these video signals, we think of them as being unipolar. But I want to have bipolar modulation, meaning I'm going to go into an initial point, and I'm going to make the initial point like really small, like 1.04, and if I go back over here, pull some more of this in. So if I make this a little bit more negative, so we've got this at negative, oh that's a lot, let's just keep this kind of tiny, negative 0.09, then we're going to have positive and negative things happening. And then when I pull this threshold out, it'll kind of hold the things there a little bit more because of that. Because it's going positive and negative, it's going to wiggle things around and make that a little more happening. Alright, so let's see how we can... And one more thing I might want to try to do here is, let's go up to the color processor, and what do we got here? We've got this HSL modulator and hue modulator 2. What's hue modulator 2? Throws saturation in there as well. Yeah. Let's grab this one. Put this in. There. And I want to just modulate hue the tiniest bit. Oh yeah, most def. Thanks for stopping by and saying hello. I'm going to change the hue, whoops, offset it, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and try to move it the tiniest amount possible. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So you can see if I pull this threshold out all the way, it's going to be doing a tiny bit of hue cycling. And maybe I want to bring the saturation down a tiny amount as well. So I'm going to hold down Shift, turn the saturation down to like 0.99, and then we'll get this sort of saturation loss so it's a little bit more pastel. Alright, awesome. And then a fun thing to do while you have this all set up, I think it's this thing which is doing the big like stuttering things right now. I'm going to turn this down slightly. Just turn this up a lot. Let's grab one filter in here. Yeah, for whatever reason, high pass filter isn't doing the thing that it used to for me. If I'm having some glitches happening, would not be impossible. Maybe it's just like you can't load this many filters. You have too many filters right now. Because this should definitely be doing something, and it's totally not. Some pastel colors right now. Alright, so let me now see if I can figure out how to just use the vsynthy things to make this sort of pull in and out. So, if I go up to color here, what do we got? We do have an HSL modulator. Let me pull up this HSL modulator. Probably going to end up breaking my rule of having only 2 modulators, because if I want to have something just globally modulating HSL, then I'm going to need one more modulator. But let me just think about that for a second. Let me see what I can do with the modulators I have, actually. I gave myself a limit, so let me try to hold with that. So I've got this HSL modulator right here. You can see that I've got light, which I can use to pull the whole thing out. So that's what I was looking for. And then we can use textures to modulate each one of these. Sat. Also sat. One of these has got to be bright. So I said I wasn't going to use another one. Heck with it. I'm going to grab one more of these. Not this one. Let me just use this one over here. And I pull this one into here. I'm guessing this will modulate light, because yes. There we go. I want that to be at unity. And then if I turn the time way down and pull the frequency down, I think we're going to have exactly what my goal was. It might be a little too slow, but oh yes, exactly, perfectly. Awesome. So I think I'm pretty much about done with this episode. Now is a great time to ask some more questions if y'all's got any more. And by done with this episode, I mean I'll just spend about 15 minutes goofing around with these controls while I got everything set up. But yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to get to. I ended up having to use 3 modulators, which is totally cheating, but I didn't really plan on wanting to do this specific thing where I was pulling the thing in and out at the end of the thing. So I guess, that's what happens. Now that I've got this all set up, let's play around. I need this temporal filter up here. It's so stroby. Feedback modulator is strobing out. Let's see. There we go. That smoothed things out. So it wasn't the whole thing strobing out. It was just this feedback thing strobing out. Temporal filter is a time filter. How would I go about performing with something like this? Honestly, I don't really do live performance that much, so I'm usually not the best person to ask about this. But if I was doing this on a laptop, I would just use the HDMI out. Whatever size window you got here, you can resize this. So I would probably set my output window to whatever sort of thing I was plugging into for a projector or for the screens or whatever, and then drag this around to just fill up my external screen. And then I would also use a MIDI controller most likely. I would set up MIDI controls in for the most important things on this so that I wasn't just playing with a mouse the whole time. Yeah, theoretically that's how I would do it, but most likely I just wouldn't because I don't really do a lot of live performances. yes, something else I wanted to do. Let's get some rotational modulation happening on this one as well. Word! That's good to hear. But if I use... This one's coming out from there, going into there. I grab this one and use it to modulate rotation. That's going to be nonsense. This is going to be a nonsense thing to do. Yeah, that's not going to do anything. If I grab this one out and use this to modulate rotation. Ha! Yeah, that's the kind of nonsense I was looking for. Of course, if I needed something that was not feedback modulation, a little more, that might make a little more sense. Grab this one over here. There we go. And if I go over to this hue modulator right here, the feedback one, and I turn up the hue, then we're going to see some, get ready for some rainbow zones. There we go. It's almost impossible for me to do one of these without some sort of like nauseating rainbow zones happening. Super saturated. Then we're going to get some of this like total video waves looking stuff happening over here. Make the displacement a little bit tinier for now. -3 displacement depth. And zoom. And get it zoomed to 1.0. There we go. When doing the video feedback, sometimes the tiniest numbers possible are going to be the most interesting ones. Now, I have one more modulation thing in here. What should I feed into it? Maybe this one. Let's see, did I cover everything in my notes? I did, yeah. Nice. Trying to make sure there's not a single modulation input not being used somewhere on here. Oh gosh. Except for this one. We gotta leave this one alone. This one will keep it down. Alright, here is a hurricane. Alright, here we are. It is 9 p.m. and I'm going to call it a night. Thanks a lot for everyone for stopping by. And I will see you next week when I do some more goofy things with video waves. Thank you.